Welcome everyone. For those who are just arriving, we're just going to wait one more minute to see if we can get a few more attendees, but thank you very much for joining us. So we'll be kicking off in just a minute. Okay, feels like a good time to kick off. So thank you again for joining us. Welcome to Utopi's Lunch and Learn. I'm really looking forward to all of you enjoying what Falk has to say. So just a couple of housekeeping things to kick us off. Today will be around 40 minutes, and then we have a Q&A in the chat throughout. So if you've got any questions that pop up, please feel free to put them in the chat, and we will use that to kick off our Q&A at the end of Falk's session today. We will also have a couple of interactive polls throughout today's Lunch and Learn. So if you've got your mobile device, please keep that handy. There'll be a QR code to scan so that you can interact with some of the questions. And other than that, if you think of any questions after the event, myself and my marketing assistant, Eve, will be reaching out to all of you. So don't feel like you have to ask a question today, but I know sometimes things pop up after the event. So yes, without further ado, I'm very proud to hand over to Falk Bleyl. He is our CTO and one of our co-founders here at Utopi. So Falk, the floor is yours.
All right, that's great. Thank you. And yeah, welcome to this session. I feel like a coiled spring there, ready to be let loose. So I'm looking forward to this conversation, and I'm really looking forward to any questions or comments that you may have, and also to the responses in a couple of polls that we've made part of this. So today we're going to speak about the impact that Utopi can have that are relevant to ESG and sustainability consultants. And I hope that today's session is going to be of value and of relevance to you. Just for those of you who perhaps know not too much about Utopi at this time, Utopi is a company that specializes in ESG technology, and we provide real-time data solutions to help operators and asset managers also reduce carbon emissions and optimize their building performance. We're based in Glasgow. We've been around for about 5 years, just over 5.5 years we've been trading. And just recently, we were recognized as the fastest growing technology business in Scotland in the Sunday Times 100 tech rankings, which we're really proud of. And you can see our office location there in a nice retro building that actually complements our ESG credentials. To date, we've installed primarily in purpose-built student accommodation, but also built to rent and some commercial deployments, some 50,000 units across 8 countries. And we have about 77,000 devices deployed. And those devices,
Falk,
they are busy.
I'm so sorry to interrupt, Falk. Do you mind stopping your screen share and then resharing? A couple of people can't see your screen right now, but some of us can. All right, so sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem at all. Let me see. I might just do it as a window. So hopefully is that coming up all right?
Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
All good now. Perfect. Thank you so much, Falk. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no trouble at all. And those devices are busy gathering data 24/7, and we've gathered since we started this over 18 billion data points that are relevant to our customers, and I'll share a little bit more about what that means later on. Who do we work with? You will recognize probably some of these names that are shown there. We work with both operators and investors in the PBSA space, but like I said, also in some other residential and commercial sectors as well. But our focus is primarily in this area. The data that we gather fits into this pyramid, where basically it underlines and underpins, reporting that goes up this particular chain, whether it is, through BREEAM, for example, BREEAM in use, and into GRESB, and those things clearly support and underpin investor requirements when it comes to mandatory benchmarks also. And we can see now and going forward also a tightening of some of those benchmark requirements, and with that also a tightening of requirements for data that can show, not only that data can be reported, but also that trends are going in the right direction, i.e. when it comes to emissions, clearly that they go downwards. So how do we do this? We deploy technology in buildings, and I'll show a little bit as to what that looks like. So effectively what we have is we have some devices on the left that gather data and provide control capabilities. And I'll touch on some of those things that are there. They connect wirelessly across an IoT network that we deploy within a building. And through that, then basically we then surface that data to our clients on a software as a service platform. And what really is important is that those three things come together, and that they are done ideally by one organization that understands, the whole aspect of it, to provide appropriate network coverage, to select the appropriate devices, and also to have a software platform that can show all that data in a proper manner. And there's a trade-off to be had. You have generalist platforms that are out there who say, oh yeah, we can do any device, no problem at all. But they often don't know the devices and their quirks and sometimes their limitations. They often don't worry about the network aspect specifically. And then the platform is often a DIY job where somebody then needs to effectively build dashboards and develop that directly themselves. And what we've done is we've brought those things together and have put them together, integrated them. We test devices on the left quite significantly to make sure that they do exactly what they're supposed to. We've weeded out some devices on the basis of security issues and so on. And we use devices, that we know and trust, and where we know and understand the vendors also. The technology we deploy is wireless, has low disruption and low impact on residents, which makes it perfect for a retrofit. But also it can and is increasingly deployed also in new build type scenarios. But the fact that it's wireless, rather than using, let's say, for example, wired M-bus for meter connectivity, installing meters that are wirelessly communicating in a building that has a reliable wireless infrastructure, makes even the installation and commissioning process much easier than what it would be on some of the, I'll call them legacy technologies when it comes to meter technologies, for example. And so with that, and the fact that we use devices that are, produced by product specialists, so a water meter is that uses LoRaWAN as the technology that we use, is produced by a company that has made millions of water meters historically, and they are experts in water meters and have added the comms bit that is relevant to our solution to their existing products. And we've done the same thing with others as well. And we've developed one particular device directly ourselves, and it's that multi-sensor that you see at the bottom there on the left-hand side. And I'll touch a little bit on why we've done that and what data that actually provides. And with that, what we do is we gather the data and we do the analytics and the ESG reporting on the one hand. We implement temperature controls on the other hand, which is one of the key cost items for many of our clients. And we also work with tenants, and that's in a student accommodation type of scenario, as well as build to rent, but can also be for commercial use. In today's session, I will not focus on the tenant engagement so much, but I will talk very much about the first two aspects there, and provide a bit more context. So why are we doing this? The basic premise is that buildings today, for many of the operators, are black boxes. And especially residential buildings fall into that category. And an operator may go into a particular room or an apartment or so periodically if there's a specific requirement, but normally during normal operation, they don't understand whether the space is performing the way that it should, and what issues may exist, and therefore operators are effectively flying blind. BMSs and sensors that are connected to BMSs are typically concerned with core building functions rather than individual rooms or apartments. And with that, you have typically limited sensor deployment. BMSs often also suffer from the fact that there's limited access for operational staff, limited training, and it's often treated as a difficult thing that is restricted and is really, really complex. When it comes to metering, many of you will be familiar with the building regulations that use a word that lawyers hate and that value engineers love, the word should. And that means that much of the capability that the Part L of the building regulations, encourage people to have, is often not implemented or implemented poorly, so that data, even at that sub-meter level, is not, available to read remotely, for example, and to do anything with. And then the question is, how is that data made available? And again, quite often it stays in the black box, or it stays in an apartment, or it stays in a meter cupboard, or in a riser, or something like that, and people don't look at that. And when it comes to controls that are installed in buildings, what we see increasingly is that heating controls, if they are too tightly controlled, are tampered with. They're limited in some cases, excuse me, and they're also easy to circumvent, and I'll touch on some of that going forward. So the data that we gather, the multi-sensor as a device that we've developed, which fits ideally into a residential environment, but also in some office space and commercial environments. It provides regular measurements on temperature, humidity, air quality, light levels, noise, motion. And that kind of data actually provides context, and it also provides overwatch to some of the temperature control functions in particular. We also gather external weather data, because again, certainly when it comes to heating, most of the heating or most impact on heating requirements clearly comes from what the external temperature is over a period of time. We also have then meters, depending on the building. It may be electricity meters only, and quite often we have that at unit level. Water meters, heat meters, gas meters, any utility, that needs to be measured, because again, that is typically where the costs are measured and where the costs arise, and understanding utility consumption, measuring it, helps in actually identifying outliers. And outliers can be quite significant in certain areas, where you would expect that every student, for example, in a building in student accommodation would use broadly the same amount of electricity. Nothing is further from the truth, and we'll touch on some of those things later on. And the controls element is clearly vital as well, because it gives us the opportunity to then actually provide the control to help reduce and limit consumption in an appropriate way. So this brings us to the first poll. And if I could ask you to have a look at that, please. Scan the QR code and then, provide a couple of brief answers if you have them. From what I've just outlined, are there any other data points that you would be interested in having, and being able to see as such? And if so, if you could share them with us, please, that would be great. So if you scan the QR code, that question should come up for you, and it should give you a form where you can fill in the answer and then actually provide the response. So I'm going to carry on just now, but the poll is still available. People counting, okay, that's a great one. We do that as well. Again, very interesting, the kind of data that comes from that. Communal areas, for example, understanding utilization and realizing that cinema rooms, for example, are notoriously underutilized in spaces. You may have anecdotal evidence or a view on that, but effectively having that kind of data, in an objective fashion actually can help in some investment or design decisions that are being made, or perhaps even repurposing spaces, or being innovative in how communal spaces are used. Overheating, absolutely, the platform will show which spaces are overheated, and I'll show you a screenshot from our system later on that actually allows you to pinpoint that very, very quickly and very easily. Temperature variance over time. Again, you'll be able to see that, and you'll be able to do analytics on that. And I'll cover that perhaps also a little bit at a later point. What we've seen through that, for example, and this is the Overwatch element, is where we worked with an existing temperature control solution, and we had a multi-sensor in, and it showed very clearly that the existing temperature control solution that was in place and had been for a while wasn't actually working the way that it had been designed to work. So having that Overwatch capability is quite significant. So, and thank you for your contributions in that area. Like I said, that's still available to add to if you wish to. So the difference then really, without having Utopi in place and with Utopi, you'll see the contrast there. If you try to get any data or any insights out of a building, without the systems and the services that we offer, typically you would have qualitative data. It's subjective, it's snapshots. You have a limited number of respondents. Would be quite labor intensive. Typically, it requires you to be on site to do something. There's a time lag between gathering the data and being able to analyze it, and it's quite costly. And with Utopi, as you can see, all that data that I've touched on earlier is available immediately. It is quantitative, which means that you can analyze it properly in numbers. It's objective data. It's not about who perceives a room to be warm or cold. You can actually have a value. Now, whether that value is perceived as warm or cold by an individual is still a different thing, but you have an actual number. And you can get that data over long periods of time. and see basically how things change. And you can do that across the whole building and so on. So it shows you the difference between, on the one hand, having an automated data collection capability, and on the other hand, not having that. And that level of insight gives you significant depth of insight into a building and the way that it actually works. And then the question is, what is normal within a building? And what is normal depends on a variety of factors. And I've listed a few here that give you an idea as to, what things can actually change what is normal for a building. Levels of occupancy, for example, the location of a building, whether you're in Aberdeen, in London, or in Barcelona, will have an impact on, energy consumption, the length and the duration of a heating season, and so on. The levels of control that you have, or the types of controls put into a building, and how they're configured. We've certainly seen and noticed with our clients that if you tighten the controls too much and try to do too much, that basically at that point things break, in the sense that residents, sometimes perhaps even revolt against that, and then look at ways to either tamper with the controls that are put in place or to try and circumvent them in some shape or form. But all these things impact what is normal for a particular building. And what you can do with the Utopi data set is actually establish a baseline for a building so that you have something to compare against and work from going forward. This here gives you a bit of a benchmark, and we've done this across a number of our customers, where we understand what their gas consumption is and what their electricity consumption is, and that's on a per bed basis, to try and normalize that data. Now, what you can see is the lines here that indicate the horizontal line shows you the benchmark for average gas consumption, and the vertical line in blue shows you the benchmark for average electricity consumption. And it basically means really what you want to do is, for your building, in a benchmark situation, you want to be in the bottom left quadrant. And you can see some buildings that are kind of poking out over to the top right there. And if you were looking at a portfolio of sites, so you were looking at a number of sites, those are the ones that you would probably want to tackle first to understand what the problem is there. And it may be lack of control. It may be, controls that are not properly configured. It may be a building fabric issue, that is actually driving, consumption and costs up. Or it may be a demographic situation as well, where you have people, that like it particularly warm or whatever. And so from that point of view, we do some benchmarking, and we do this with our clients also, and help them understand basically where, in a market or in a sector type of environment, where they sit against, other sites, that are similar to theirs. So, and then basically having a baseline and having a benchmark, the question is really, where am I, or where are we with the site, and where am I going? What's a realistic goal, that I'm going to try and achieve? And then basically, the realistic goal, a benchmark would typically help with, to understand what that is. And then once you know your starting position and your goal, you need to map a route. And as the picture on the left shows, there are many ways that routes that lead to London. And, there are some that are maybe quicker, that may cost a bit more. And then there are others, that may take a little bit longer, maybe more cost effective, may have less impact on the environment, and so on. And basically, the challenge is then that I suspect all of you, or most of you, will be working on, is how do we get, from where we are to where we want to go, and basically map that route, and then track progress also along the way. And the services we offer, the platform that we have, can actually help firstly establish a starting point, establish a benchmark, or help with setting a particular goal, and then also throughout that process help to track progress along that particular path. So that could be, for example, when it comes to indoor temperature or utility consumption, and we work with our clients on that. Controls being part of that on the one hand, and potentially customer engagement or resident engagement on the other. Last year we did a study with GLL where we looked at buildings and their EPC certification, and what we did is we looked at sites that had controls in them and those that didn't, and we compared EPC B and EPC C rated buildings. And what's very clear, as can be seen on the right there on the graphs, is that EPC C buildings without controls had the highest fuel consumption or energy consumption per room per square meter. And with controls, that dropped significantly. The EPCB buildings performed better overall and were a bit tighter where controls were implemented as well. But what this really shows is that EPC performance is only one issue. How a building is managed, has a direct and significant impact also on the utility consumption within that building. So I came across this this bit of information, and I'm going to use this to draw a parallel here. There's a company called EvoPhase. They're part of the University of Birmingham, who I think it was last month actually shared a press release and where they talked about having developed a new wind turbine that's been designed and optimized for urban deployment. And I'm fascinated by microgeneration and renewable energy. So I really like this. Now, what this company did is they used AI to do some evolutionary testing that was all done in software, where over a period of several weeks, they tested 2,000 different wind turbine designs and basically then optimized this particular wind turbine. And this is the design that they came up with. That's now been built and is now being tested this year to see if the predictions actually match up with reality, or if reality matches up with the predictions. Now, what I really like about this, and where I want to draw the parallel, is that using the Utopi platform, you can get information on scenario testing when it comes to the journey to net zero, as in where to test. If you understand where your portfolio sits in terms of energy consumption or average indoor temperature within the building, that'll point very clearly to where the most impact is going to be had, what to test. It gives you the opportunity, if you understand what energy consumption and temperature performance is like in every particular space or room within your building, you can actually test buildings on a fractional level also. So you can do a test on a per floor basis or so, and then compare different floors where you run different scenarios, potentially at the same time in parallel to each other. And all this, what it does is it allows you to shorten the duration of tests. It lowers the test cost and risk, because instead of having to deploy something in a whole building and wait a year to see if it's actually done what you expect it to do, you can see the impact very, very quickly. And we've done that with some of our customers where we've put in temperature control solutions and we have a before and after, or we do a half building with and a half building without, and where that difference is very quickly evident and where you can then test a return on investment. And it also shortens the feedback cycle because the data is just there. So what we've done with some of our customers is we've installed our sensors first, and we had them run for a week or two, and it gives you, an immediate view as to what the performance is like within that building, and then deploying control on the back of that helps. But that's only part of the journey, because you can then also see what other things, building fabric wise, for example, or building system wise, you might want to change and improve on. So we've worked with a company, and we're just about to implement a feedback loop into the BMS to see if information on the wet heated system and the heat demand from radiators being fed into the BMS, will help the BMS to actually make better decisions and become more efficient. And when it comes to controls, controls are often a bit like this, where you have a barrier, on a road. And here it's very, very clear and very evident to see what can happen with heating controls and how do you circumvent them. Here's your solution. Other shops are available as well that you can go to, but effectively it is easy, to try and circumvent some of the controls. And if you don't have visibility of that, then you'll never know why, a building's energy consumption is not coming down. And we're very much into what we call co-management, where we give a resident, a scope within which, they can manage their own consumption on the approved heating system, if you like. And, then basically the platform helps, regulate that, within certain parameters that are set by our clients. And just to give you an idea as to what that actually looks like on the platform, this is a view on a heat map, and it's very obvious and very quick to see, where the overheated spaces are, and that information is literally available at the click of a button, and reports and alerts are provided in that sense as well. What we try to do is we try to effectively take, the original bell curve, which is the orange colored one, where the average temperature in a building in this case was about 24 degrees, and shift that bell curve to the left. Following, our work with the client, we managed to get that down to 19.6 degrees average temperature. And typically what you want to do is try and squeeze the bell curve as well, so that you don't have the extreme outliers. So the extreme overheats on the one hand, but also perhaps, the extreme underheats where, heating is just switched off. That may cause potential building fabric issues over time. Again, having that data and getting that data coming in, it helps actually map out the journey to net zero carbon, where you measure and establish your baseline, where ideally you optimize first of all. So if you have a gas heated scheme, for example, to try and reduce the overall consumption in that particular scheme. And then you decarbonize based on the right size demand that particular building has as such. And that can lead to significant CapEx savings. And that then afterwards you continue to monitor to make sure that the desired effects are actually forthcoming as you would wish. So just to give an idea as to some of the things that we have uncovered through the data, and the list is much longer than this, but it just gives you an idea. We've come across misconfigured BMSs. We've identified gas boiler issues where the gas boiler wasn't performing to specification at all. We've come across building fabric issues when it comes to overheating, leaky windows, and misconfigured HVAC systems in very modern buildings that basically led to poor air quality because it's switched off at a time when it shouldn't. And when it comes to resident behavior, looking at tampering and circumvention, students running businesses from their apartments, crypto mining, open windows, and the list literally goes on and on. But those are the kinds of things that you can only really see if you have the data sets available to you, and then draw the conclusions that come from it. So in conclusion, really, my wife would call this a dad joke, but basically, what we at Utopi give you is X-ray vision on the one hand and control on the other, and giving you those unprecedented insights into your buildings, giving operators unprecedented insights into their buildings. So, and that concludes really what I have to present, and just wanted to ask at the end if, having gone through this, is there anything else that, has piqued your interest, or do you have any ideas, as to how we might be able to help you in your tasks further, potentially with data acquisition, reporting, different data sets or so that you don't see there at the moment that would be of relevance and value to you. And again, if you want to use the QR code, I'll take you to this particular question, and we welcome any responses that you may have.
Thank you for that, Falk. While we're waiting for people to use the poll, we do have a couple of questions through the chat. So one question, now this popped up when you were looking at the benchmarking of gas versus electric heated assets. Yeah. Where has the benchmarking data come from?
It's from customers' billing information, typically main meter information over a period of time. That's where that particular data comes from. And then, we know how many, in this case, student beds there are in a student accommodation environment, and that gives us then the way to normalize that data so that it's relevant regardless of the size of the building.
Great. We have another question which is about LoRaWAN. Okay. So bandwidth demands are always going up. Is LoRaWAN capable of handling future bandwidth needs for Utopi's services?
Okay, really good question. And the simple answer is yes. Basically, LoRaWAN is a technology, and IoT services generally are services that require very little information to be sent and transmitted. And they're also being sent, they're being sent periodically, and they're sent in very small formats. So just to give an idea, like the multi-sensor, for example, it sends several data points in a single transmission, and it's done in a very efficient way because it just sends us the numbers, and because we know how to decode it, all that's documented and so on. It means that there isn't actually much data transmitted when it comes to each individual transmission, and LoRaWAN as a technology is built and designed for scale, which means that the way that it's deployed in the building, we can easily layer additional services onto that, and the LoRaWAN infrastructure in the buildings and the technology has been designed to cope with significant scale.
Right. It seems we've had one response to this poll. There might also be some more responses to our earlier poll as well, Falk.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. No, that's great. Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Feel free to raise your hand as well if anybody would like to ask them here. And as I say, we'll be following up with each of you afterwards if you'd like to email them through to us as well. Yeah. But yeah, I think thank you very much, Falk. Always great, as always, to hear your insights. Anyone on the call, we've also got loads of data stories and case studies that we can share with you. So when I reach out, we'll give you some helpful links. But thank you very much for your time today. And thank you again, Falk.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.